From the heart of our nation's capital, here's Family Research Council President Tony Perkins.
Well, Happy New Year. Thanks so much for tuning in to Washington Watch. I'm always grateful when you can join us. Well, coming up, Congress will not be back in D.C. this week. They will return next week. However, a large House delegation led by House Speaker Mike Johnson is headed to the southern border as we speak, where illegal migrant encounters hit another record last month of over 300,000.
We're having to pull teeth to change policy. This is not irregular migration. That's a bunch of BS. This is a predictable outcome of bad policy choices made right after Biden became president.
That was South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham Sunday on Face the Nation. Now, I know that we are constantly hearing these numbers, and after a while, it sounds like, the voices of the adults on the old Peanuts cartoons. Wah, wah, wah. Nobody hears what they're saying. But let me help put this last month's encounters with illegals into perspective. Just last month, all right, just 1 month. And these are just those who wanted to be detained. They basically turned themselves in so they could be released. These numbers do not include those who evade capture. They didn't want to get caught. The 300,000 plus that came in last month is the equivalent to the population of Cincinnati, Ohio, Newark, New Jersey, St. Paul, Minnesota, or Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. What do you do with that many people coming into the country month after month? Well, Alabama Congressman Robert Aderholt is headed to the southern border, but he will join us first in just a moment. And as we enter 2024, a presidential election year, prepare for more shenanigans like that of Maine's Secretary of State, who removed Donald Trump from the state primary ballot.
I am mindful that no Secretary of State has ever deprived a presidential candidate of access to the ballot under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. But I'm also mindful that no presidential candidate has ever before engaged in insurrection.
That was Shinna Bellows last Friday. Amazing. Maine's Secretary of State apparently has some hidden knowledge. I mean, she's now judge and jury deciding on a matter that former President Donald Trump has not even been charged with in a court of law. We'll talk with Jeff Clark, Senior Fellow and Director of Litigation for the Center for Renewing America. More information surfacing on how not to handle a pandemic.
You attach a zero value to whether this actually totally disrupts people's lives, ruins the economy, and has many kids kept out of school in a way that they never quite require.
Collateral damage.
So collateral damage. This is a public health mindset, and I think a lot of us involved in trying to make those recommendations had that mindset, and that was really unfortunate. It's another mistake we made.
That was former White House advisor and National Institutes of Health Director Dr. Francis Collins. Now, despite this admission of not having all the facts or a broader perspective of their recommendations and the impact that they would have, he stopped short of acknowledging that it was unwise and counterproductive to silence differing views. We're going to get more from Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, professor of health policy at Stanford University. And last Friday, Governor Mike DeWine of Ohio vetoed the state's SAFE Act that would have protected minors from experimental drugs and surgeries being pushed by trans activists.
I cannot sign this bill as is currently written. And just a few minutes ago, I vetoed the bill.
That was Governor Mike DeWine on Friday. Will there be a legislative effort like the ones that took place in Arkansas and Louisiana that overrode the governor's vetoes? Well, we're going to talk with the bill's lead author in Ohio State Representative Gary Click, who also pastors Fremont Baptist Temple, a little later here on Washington Watch. Also, FRC's Dr. Jennifer Bowens, who has testified before several state legislatures on the SAFE Act legislation, will join us to discuss why these measures are needed. And also in the news today, embattled Harvard President Claudine Gay resigned, not for her failure to address anti-Semitism on Harvard's campus, as she openly admitted.
We do not punish or sanction people for expressing such views, but that is a far cry for endorsing them. It's in the exercise of our freedom to speak that we reveal our characters.
Well, her resignation was due to accusations of plagiarism that all the attention surrounding her dredged up. Oh, well. The website is TonyPerkins.com. Lots of resources there for you. Be sure and check it out. And a little bit later, I'm going to have something new that I'm going to share with you. So stick around. I need your input. Our word for today comes from Genesis 4, where Cain receives a warning from the Lord before Cain kills his brother Abel. If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should rule over it. End quote. The choices Cain would make were not his parents' fault. He had the same mom and dad as Abel. The choice was his. He could not blame his environment, as important as that may be, nor could he rationalize his sin as the consequence of bad parents, although they did set a poor example. It was his and his alone. This is called self-government. This is what undergirds government at every level. It all begins with self-government, closing the door on the sin of self-desire in our own will and yielding in humble obedience to God. Sin, that is Satan and evil, their desire is for us, but we must take dominion over it. I invite you to join us on our journey through the Bible. Visit frc.org/Bible for more information on this exciting, life-changing journey through the Word of God. Last month, as I mentioned, saw a record-shattering number of illegal border crossings with migrant encounters exceeding 300,000 for the month. House Speaker Mike Johnson plans to visit the southwest border tomorrow with a delegation from the House, while security experts continue their warnings that the open border facilitated by the Biden administration's policies provides a soft target for deadly terrorist attacks. Now, with Republicans in both chambers of Congress demanding a border fix in exchange for additional spending to support the war in Ukraine, what will it take to reduce the daily threat facing our country? Joining me now to discuss this, Congressman Robert Aderholt, who serves on the House Appropriations Committee. He represents the 4th Congressional District of Alabama, and he is on his way to the southern border as we speak. Congressman, thanks so much for taking time to join us.
Well, Tony, it's good to be with you. Yes, and you're exactly right. I'm actually in the airport now. When I got the message to be on your show, I wanted to be here, but it worked out that I'm at the airport. So if it's a little noise in the background, then please forgive me, but that's the reason why.
Well, that's all right. I appreciate you taking time to join us. The last quarter also set a record. I think we had over 780,000 contacts with illegal migrants coming across the border. This is unsustainable. What do you hope will come from this visit from the Republicans to the southern border?
Well, I appreciate Speaker Mike Johnson for putting this trip together, really to put pressure on the Democrats to try to move on something. This is something that really I think that is across the party lines. This is not just a Republican thing or Democrat issue. This is Democrats are hearing from their constituents just as Republicans are. And obviously, we want a system where people can come freely into the United States of America, but we want it in a situation where people can come legally, and that's what we're trying to do here. And unfortunately, the way the border is so porous right now, the Biden administration is not enforcing, and because of that, we're seeing a lot of people coming across the borders, and I think that's probably what we'll see tomorrow. Of course, obviously, I don't know how much this is being publicized, so it may be that a lot of the illegals go to alternative sites tomorrow, since there's going to be so much attention there at Eagle Pass, Texas, where we'll be. But I think we will see firsthand exactly what is going on, and we're seeing how the people from south of the border are coming in, and hopefully this will call some immediate attention to it, and we can try to put some pressure on the Democrats to come together and find some solution.
So, Congressman, I mean, the numbers don't lie. I mean, they're there. We see these records month after month, during the almost 4 years of the Biden administration, constantly setting new records of illegals coming across the border. Isn't this a failure to enforce the law? I mean, aren't we seeing the Biden administration refusing to uphold their constitutional duty?
Yeah, well, that's what we're seeing, Tony. But of course, obviously, there are a lot in the Biden administration that really don't feel strongly about this issue, so they're looking the other way. And it's very unfortunate that we find ourselves in a situation where I forgot who said it once, but they said as long as you keep the back door open, you have to keep the front door closed. And the front door is legal immigration. The back door is coming in illegally. And in order to keep that front door open, you have to shut the back door. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's all we're asking. I mean, I would be the first to say I have a lot of friends from around the world. And, you know, I understand that people want to come here to the United States of America, but we're in a situation right now where we have to make sure that the people are coming here are coming for the right reason. When they come here illegally, when they come here through the back door, so to speak, you don't know why they're coming. Some of them may be coming because of good reasons, and they're just trying to provide for their family. But at the same time, there's a lot of folks that also may be coming illegally that are trying to do harm to the United States through drugs, trafficking, and that's what we've got to put a stop to. So we want to make sure the good people, and like I say, the people who want to embrace the principles of this country, hard work, and trying to make sure that they provide for their family, we welcome with open arms.
Right.
It's the people that would want to come for nefarious reasons that we want to keep out.
But you can only regulate that if they're coming through the front door. You can't do that through the back door.
Through the front door.
And
that's exactly what we're seeing tomorrow. Lord's willing, we'll have a chance to see firsthand where some of these back doors are and see how we can do to try to wall those areas off, so to speak. And maybe it takes literally a wall. And obviously, if people think that they can come illegally here, they're going to do it.
Right.
And so we've got to, of course, and that's why I think President Trump was very on message when he talked about building the wall.
Right.
And there's some areas that you literally have to build a wall so that you can keep that front door open.
But Congress actually passed a law requiring the wall to be built, and they allocated the funds to do that. Secretary of Homeland Security Mayorkas has not done that. Is this building the momentum for an impeachment of him?
Well, I'm not on the Homeland Security committee, but my understanding that there has been several attempts to move on that legislation over the past several months. And I think if something's not done, that I think Mike Johnson will very well bring something to the floor. He is on the Judiciary Committee, or was on the Judiciary Committee before he took the reins as Speaker. And so I know there were a lot of in the works on Judiciary and Homeland Security of impeaching the Secretary. And so I very much think that Speaker Johnson will move forward on this if the Biden administration doesn't act responsibly.
Well, the chances are they won't start acting responsibly now because they haven't the whole time they've been in office.
Yeah.
Congressman Robert Aderholt, always great to see you. Safe travels, and look forward to getting a report when you all return.
I look forward to it, Tony. Thanks for having me on. See you later.
All right, absolutely. Congressman Robert Aderholt of Alabama. In fact, I think we're going to actually have the speaker on later in the week giving us a rundown on their journey. Well, coming up, the left's pursuit of Donald Trump has made one thing clear. If they can't win elections at the ballot box, they'll use every other means possible. We'll talk about it next. Don't go away.
Everything we do begins as an idea. Before there can be acts of courage, there must be the belief that some things are worth sacrificing for. Before there can be marriage, there is the idea that man should not be alone. Before there was freedom, there was the idea that individuals are created equal. It's true that all ideas have consequences, but we're less aware that all consequences are the fruit of ideas. Before there was murder, there was hate. Before there was a Holocaust, there was the belief by some people that other people are undesirable. Our beliefs determine our behavior, and our beliefs about life's biggest questions determine our worldview. Where did I come from? Who decides what is right and wrong? What happens when I die? Our answers to these questions explain why people see the world so differently. Debates about abortion are really disagreements about where life gets its value. Debates over sexuality and gender and marriage are really disagreements about whether the rules are made by us or for us. What we think of as political debates are often much more than that. They're disagreements about the purpose of our lives and the source of truth. As Christians, our goal must be to think biblically about everything. Our goal is to help you see beyond red and blue, left and right, to see the battle of ideas at the root of it all. Our goal is to equip Christians with a biblical worldview and help them advance and defend the faith in their families, communities, and the public square. Cultural renewal doesn't begin with campaigns and elections. It begins with individuals turning from lies to truth. But that won't happen if people can't recognize a lie and don't believe truth exists. We want to help you see the spiritual war behind the political war, the truth claims behind the press release, and the forest from the trees.
Welcome back to Washington. Watch the website, TonyPerkins.com. Resources there for you. Be sure and check it out. Last week, actually last Thursday, the state of Maine joined Colorado in attempting to subvert the election process when its Secretary of State, Shenna Bellows, barred former President Donald Trump from her state's Republican primary ballot. Now, former President Trump's legal team filed an appeal earlier today regarding Maine. They're also challenging Colorado before the Supreme Court. But what do these actions expose about the left's willingness to use lawfare to hinder a candidate they fear they cannot beat at the polls? Can our system survive these subversive tactics? Joining me now to discuss this, Jeff Clark, Senior Fellow and Director of Litigation at the Center for Renewing America. Jeff, welcome back to the program.
Well, great to be here. Tony, thanks for having me back, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well. It's going to be a challenging year full of, I wouldn't say surprises, because I think we anticipated some of these. But do you expect to see other states follow suit with Maine and Colorado?
I do, Tony. I think that this is all a plan that was plotted out long ago. If you look at what was the single article of impeachment for the second impeachment against President Trump after he'd left office, making him the first president ever to face an attempt to impeach him and bar him from office, which was the only consequence, right, since he was already out of office, that ever has happened to an American president. That sole article of impeachment was that he had engaged in an insurrection or given aid or comfort to it, and that failed. They brought the charge. The House approved it without any hearings, but it failed in the trial in the Senate. And so that's one reason why this whole effort should be done. It's an attempt at a second, third, fourth, et cetera, bite at the apple. But this is a plan that very sophisticated people put together years ago now, 3 years ago or earlier. And we're just seeing it unfold. And we're seeing, ridiculously people like Shenna Bellows, who's not a lawyer, drop a legal opinion that was clearly carefully lawyered. And that's part of the plan, too. And I think that the Heritage folks are trying to get to the bottom through their oversight project of who actually wrote her decision. And I think the Maine legislature should try to do the same through oversight.
Jeff, isn't this kind of like, you get one of those nice sweaters and you get one of the threads that comes out and you pull it and all of a sudden you find it's unraveling? I mean, doesn't this pose that type of threat to our republic? I mean, if you've got, let's play this out with Biden. There's an impeachment inquiry. Let's play this thing out, and there's plenty there. Let's say they find something, the House impeaches him. Of course, the Senate does nothing with it. Can then Republican state officials begin to remove Biden from the ballot?
I do think, look, that at some point turnabout has to be fair play. The Democrats have unleashed all of this lawfare. They think that there are not going to be any consequences to be paid for that because they think that they're specially privileged. They think that they control the majority of the state bars. They think that they control many of the key courts that they can run to, especially the courts in D.C. So they don't think that it's going to have symmetrical impacts. And I think that Congress can push back on that, but so far it seems to me that their efforts have been anemic. I've coined this term, Tony, called journo lawfare. It's not just lawfare. It's that night after night after night on MSNBC, CNN, in the print lead media of the New York Times and the Washington Post and others, we just see a constant thread of former prosecutors who always announce that doom for Trump is coming, right? And it's very carefully allied with the lawfare efforts that folks like Jack Smith are bringing, or what's happening in Georgia, or what's happening in other states like Maine and Colorado.
So, Jeff, let's talk about how we counter that, because let's give a little summary here. There were over 50 congressional investigations into Donald Trump, 2 impeachments, as you made reference to, and guess what they came up with? Nothing. And now you've got all these, different ones that are pursuing him. What have they come up with? Nothing. What has he been convicted of? Nothing. And so it is an attempt to defeat him, not at the ballot box, but in the courts and in the media, as you said. So how do conservatives combat this?
Well, I think that we need our own set of non-governmental organizations, public interest groups. We have some, but we just don't have anything like the level of energy, the level of funding, and the number of groups that they have on the left. They're the ones that are gestating these things, like the Brookings Institute with this guy Norm Eisen, right? He's been called the master of kind of political color revolutions. He had worked on Ukraine. He's imported that into the U.S. They're the ones who are coming up with these theories. We need, actually, if we're going to do turnabout, to actually formulate those institutions. So, to the extent any are watching, we need our billionaires, those who are men of faith, women of faith, and women of and men and women of resources, to come forward, our billionaires, and fund a major effort to push back on this, so that this genie of lawfare, the Pandora's box that's been opened, can be closed again and discarded.
It's interesting. The left wants to accuse believers, Christians, evangelicals of wanting a theocracy, when they're the ones that worship government and they see it as the all in all. It's their power. And that's part of the challenge we have on the right, Jeff, is that we don't see government as the end all. We have other things to do. We have our families, we have our churches, we have our nonprofit organizations that do humanitarian good. But if we want to keep that freedom, we've got to engage in the political process, and we've got to push back on what the left is doing.
That's right, Tony. In fact, today, one of my colleagues at the Center for Renewing America sent me an article. One of the things the left really is trying to blow up is this idea of Christian nationalism. And literally in the article, there was a line that really made me laugh, that these Christian nationalists are forming a worldwide conspiracy to foist Christianity upon us, right? And I laughed, because what are we dealing with the UN? What are we dealing with the World Economic Forum and these other globalist entities? They're the ones who've engaged in an actual conspiracy, right? I think all that Americans want to do is to be left alone to worship and direct their lives as they see fit.
And that is what is at stake. And that's why we have to be informed and we have to be engaged. Jeff, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate all the work that you guys do.
Absolutely. Thank you. And good luck with all of your things, Tony, as well.
All right. Jeff Clark. Folks, he said it. You've got to be involved. And this is, you've got to support groups like ours with financial resources. That's why Washington Watch is here, so you can get information outside the legacy media that is trying to force feed you poison. All right, don't go away. We're back with more after this.
All of us are born with the desire to find truth and meaning. Where did I come from? What happens when I die? While our answers to these questions may divide us, we are united in our need for the freedom to answer life's biggest questions and make life's biggest decisions for ourselves. That's why religious freedom matters for everyone. Religious freedom matters because the powerful have long wanted to control those who are less powerful. Religious freedom matters because the freedom of those who are different is often threatened by those who believe different is dangerous. Leah Sheribu, a Christian teenager in Nigeria, remains a captive of Boko Haram for her refusal to renounce her Christian faith. Chinese pastor Wang Yi is serving a 9-year sentence for speaking publicly against the Chinese government. In Pakistan, Asif Pervez is on death row for allegedly sending a blasphemous text message. All of this because people in power decided different is dangerous. At the Center for Religious Liberty at Family Research Council, we promote religious freedom for everyone because the only alternative is religious freedom for no one. We encourage Americans and the American government to engage and advocate for the persecuted, and they do. We work every day to bring good news to the afflicted, to proclaim liberty to captives and freedom to prisoners. We do it because that's what Jesus does. We work to give freedom to others because we ourselves have been set free.
Welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to have you with us in 2024. All right. The website, TonyPerkins.com. Resources there for you. Be sure and check it out. Also, if you're not receiving the Washington Stand, our news publication, you can sign up for that as well. Dr. Francis Collins, the former head of the National Institutes of Health and a science advisor, even to the current administration, has admitted that he and the others at the NIH made a mistake in not giving any weight to the collateral damage caused by the agency's response to COVID-19, basically admitting they had blinders on. They didn't care what it did to the kids psychologically, didn't care what it did to the economy. They were just wanting to make sure they stopped the spread. Well, Collins worked to orchestrate a devastating takedown of the scientists behind the Great Barrington Declaration, which said that harmful lockdowns could be avoided. I mean, basically, science is supposed to try all these different things out and listen to competing voices, but they silenced them. But he did not acknowledge that that was a problem. So where do we go from here? Are we going to see the same thing in a future pandemic? Well, joining me now to discuss this and more is Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, professor of health policy at Stanford University and one of the authors of the 2020 of the Great Barrington Declaration, which advocated for an alternative approach to the COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Bhattacharya, thanks so much for joining us. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Now, let me ask you this, because you were probably at the top of the totem pole when it came to those being targeted by the takedown by Dr. Francis Collins, where they attempted to silence you on Twitter and other social media platforms. Are you surprised by his admission that surfaced this week and has gone viral? No pun intended there?
I mean, I'd seen it actually. I think it was an interview from a few months ago. It finally caught the attention of the public. It's not surprising that he would have some regrets. Anyone that has any amount of intellectual honesty about the failure of our pandemic response and the devastating harms that it has done to the poor, to the working class, to the vulnerable, would say that that was the case. The issue then is what to be done about it now. If you listen between the lines, what he wants is basically like he just wants to move on as if nothing really happened. He doesn't really apologize. He wants to pretend like what we were proposing at the time was somehow still dangerous. He even says that in that interview. What I'm afraid, Tony, that the situation we find ourselves in is that there's pretty widespread agreement that our pandemic response was an utter failure, but that the people that designed and implemented it, people like Francis Collins, that abuse their power to conduct devastating takedowns of scientists that disagree with them, they're giving themselves awards, pats on the back, and they've sort of cemented in place the kind of the architecture of the lockdowns that they implemented. And when another pandemic happens, we will do it again.
Well, that's exactly right. That's the concern, is that there's no acknowledgement that this was an utter failure by those who are pulling the levers. And so I'm left to believe that we're going to see, despite the mounting evidence, for instance, we're seeing, expansion of different sicknesses and illnesses because we do not have the immunity that should have been built up from COVID and other infectious diseases because we had everybody locked down. Despite all of that, there doesn't appear to be anywhere on the horizon a different approach being discussed.
I mean, I think it's going to take new leadership because I think if you think about the scope of what the damage that was done by these decisions, countless children who lost their birthright to an education, especially poor and minority kids. You look at the learning loss numbers, depression at tremendous levels in young people, cancer diagnoses that were delayed as a result with people dying of cancer that should have been picked up with screening earlier, heart attack rates from people that had been stayed home instead of like going to the doctor when they should have early in the pandemic because they were so scared to go because of COVID and because they were told it was, the countless millions of people who starved as a consequence of the economic dislocation caused by lockdowns. All of those people need a voice, and they don't have one in the current sort of leadership. It's going to take real leadership committed to an honest evaluation of what happened during the pandemic, and then a commitment to reform that puts in place strong protection so that people like Francis Collins do not have the kind of power they have to essentially impose their scientific view in a sort of dictatorial way without checks and balances.
Dr. Bhattacharya, let me ask you this. I know we've talked about this before, but sometimes we're hard of hearing. We need to hear these things over and over again. Let's talk about the average person. What can they do to make sure this doesn't happen again?
I think it is very, very important that every single public official, from dog catcher to the President of the United States, be asked, what would you do in the next pandemic? Would you include a broader set of voices? Would you engage in censorship? Would you rely only on high-level science bureaucrats with conflicts of interest, or would you include a broader set of voices? Would you respect the American First Amendment? Would you put healthy people in quarantine without any recourse? Would you close churches? Would you close schools? What would you do during the next pandemic? And then vote accordingly. Because if you don't hear a solid commitment to a much better response, one that respects liberties and respects rights, that actually would have led to a much better health response, then you should just vote for somebody else.
Very, very good recommendation. Good suggestion. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, thanks so much for joining us. Always great to see you. And again, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you.
Look, each and every one of us have a role to play. So don't, we got to change the leadership. We've got Congress needs to do some things, but that was really good advice. Just, hey, whoever's running for office, whether state legislature, governor, city council, school board, what will you do if another pandemic is thrust upon us? Good question, and you should ask it. Coming up, Mike DeWine, the Republican governor of Ohio, caved to the left and vetoed a bill to protect children in the state last Friday afternoon. Question is, will state lawmakers override his veto? That's our conversation coming up after the break, so don't go away. More Washington Watch straight ahead.
The world is hurting. Streets are filled with crime. Families are broken. Sin is celebrated, and God is mocked. Everywhere we look, the wages of our sin are on full display. As Christians, we know that surrender to God's will is the solution to our biggest problems, but not everyone agrees. Even in church, we hear people say the most important thing is to be tolerant, that we shouldn't impose our morality on other people, and that loving our neighbor means celebrating what they do. But you can't do that. It's not that you don't love your neighbor, you do, but you care about God's opinion more than your neighbor's opinion, and this makes you different. In fact, sometimes it makes you feel alone, like you're the only one. But there is good news. You are not alone, not even close. Research has found that there are 59 million American adults who are a lot like you. There are millions of people around the country who are born again, deeply committed to practicing their faith, and believe the Bible is the reliable Word of God. But that's not all. They're also engaged in our government. They're voters. They're more likely to be involved in their community, and they're making a difference in elections. The problem is that a lot of them feel alone too. We want to change that. FRC wants to connect these 59 million Americans to speak the truth together, no matter the cost. If you want to learn more about this group and what it means to be a spiritually active, governance-engaged conservative, or if you want to find out if you are one of these SageCons yourself, go to frc.org/SageCon and take the quiz to find out. The world is hurting, and we have the solution. We can't do it alone, but we can do it if we work together. That's what we're working toward every day. Join us. Go to frc.org/SAGECON, SageCon, to learn more. That's SAGECON, SageCon, to learn more.
I'm often asked by people, Tony, how do you stay encouraged? How do you deal with all of the stuff in Washington, D.C., the negative policies that are attacking our faith, our family, and our freedoms? Well, you want me to let you in on the secret? It's called the Word of God. And that is why the Family Research Council embarked on Stand on the Word, a 2-year journey through the Bible. It's a chronological Bible reading plan with just 10 to 15 minutes a day. In 2 years, you will have covered the entire Bible. And to go along with this, Monday through Friday, I do a morning devotional that goes along with the reading of the day. It's all designed to encourage you on this journey because the Word of God, as the psalmist said, in my affliction, here's my comfort. Your Word gives me life. That is our source of strength. To find out more, go to tonyperkins.com or frc.org/Bible. And I invite you to join me every morning for our Stand on the Word Bible devotion. Welcome back to Washington Watch and Happy New Year once again. And by the way, this week, the Family Research Council, we launched another 2-year journey through the Bible. Just began Monday, yesterday. And so I'd love for you to join us. You can be a part of it. And we've got everything really laid out easy for you. We've got an interactive reading plan, a calendar. The readings are broken down to 10 to 15 minutes a day. And so in a period of 2 years, you'll actually have gone all the way through the Bible. And it's chronological. So it makes a lot of sense. And the testimonies from those who have gone through it over the last 2 years have just been so encouraging. People who their lives, their marriages, their families have been impacted just by the Word of God. So I invite you to join us. Go to frc.org/Bible to find out more about our Stand on the Word Bible reading plan. Now, I mentioned earlier I have something new for you, and so here it is. Regular viewers and listeners of Washington Watch have heard me discuss many times on the program SageCons. All right? How many of you know what a SageCon is? A SageCon is I see Dave in the control room raising his hand. Very good. He gets a cookie. Spiritually active, governance-engaged conservatives. That's what it means. It's people who are engaged culturally and politically because of their faith. Now, throughout 2024, I'll be inviting you to participate in polls and questionnaires to determine if you are a SageCon. And then we'll show you resources that you can use that the Family Research Council has produced for SageCons to help you engage in a way that is honoring to the Lord, consistent with His Word. Now, here's this week's poll question, all right? When it comes to the formation of your worldview, how influential is the Bible? All right, you want to take that question, that poll? Text the word poll, that's P-O-L-L, to 67742 to participate. You'll get a link, you'll get the question, and you can answer the question. Again, text the word poll, P-O-L-L, to 67742, and I'll share the results tomorrow. All right, as I mentioned at the top of the program, last Friday, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine caved to pressure from the left and vetoed House Bill 68, Ohio's SAFE Act. That's something we've been working on for years. We helped craft and pass the first one in Arkansas. Now, this simply protects minor children from sterilization and mutilation while also preserving girls' sports this is what the bill in Ohio did, by requiring athletes in school sports to participate based upon their biological sex. Now, these gender surgeries and drug cocktails for children cause irreversible damage that the medical establishment ignores as it bows in submission to the LGBTQ ideology. Now that Governor DeWine has buckled under this pressure, which is very disappointing because I've known Governor DeWine for probably 20 years, and he's done a lot of good things. But I reached out to him and was communicating with him about this, but he vetoed it. Well, joining me now to discuss this and next steps is the sponsor of House Bill 68, State Representative Gary Click. He represents the 88th District of Ohio. He's also a pastor. Representative Click, welcome back to Washington Watch. Great to see you, and Happy New Year.
Hey, Happy New Year, Tony. Thank you for allowing me to be on and to represent the SAFE Act here in Ohio. And I thank you for being a champion. You've been with us all the way, and we thank you for that. We're going to get this done.
Well, let's talk about that. You've put a lot of effort into this bill to protect children. You were on the program before talking about it at a critical juncture there in Ohio. Were you surprised by the governor's veto?
Yes and no. We never had any assurances. I've been trying to engage the governor for almost 3 years in this, and I just kept getting, the governor just wants to protect children, and that's all I could get until literally the hour before the Senate was voting on it, and we were about to concur with some of the changes that they made. That was the first time, and I got drawn into a room with the hospitals and with his staff, and I was even willing to give up a couple other things that were not critical. But the one thing the governor wanted is he wanted me to allow the puberty blockers. And I just had to say no. I've had to fight that the whole way, every step of the way. And they think only about the sex changes as far as surgically, but they don't think about the sex changes chemically. And that is the crux of this bill. Unless they do that, they don't get to the rest of this. And so we try to prevent it at the beginning, at the foundation. As you well know, 85 to 95% of the kids will grow out of the gender dysphoria when they go through puberty. But if they're put on the puberty blockers, 98% will go on to the opposite sex hormones and then ultimately later to surgery. And that's what we're trying to get ahead of.
I mean, ironically, Governor DeWine wants to ban menthol cigarettes to protect adults, but not puberty blockers to protect children. I mean, is this strictly a political decision or what? What was behind the governor's rationale here?
I don't know. I had hope the whole way as he was talking to people that he was going to see the logic behind this and what we're trying to do. I had a half-hour conversation with him, and he asked good questions. And I know some of the doctors that I put him in touch with said that they were being asked some good questions. And I just felt like in the end, even though he threatened me with a veto, I felt like he was drinking through a fire hose and that he would get it and then they would pass it. But on my birthday, he called and told me he was happy birthday, I'm going to veto your bill. And I think what got to him is I was reading in the Washington Post that he had a family come and they told him with tears in their eyes that that so-called gender-affirming care saved their life. And without that, they wouldn't have lived. And, we had a judge in Hamilton County that said, there's nothing more manipulative than that. Give me what I want or I'll kill myself. Mm-hmm. We can't make decisions based on that. And that is a self-diagnosis. We know that they have other comorbidities that lead to that. And I think he was just moved in his heart by that, but not in his head to realize that's just a false choice.
It is, and that's one that the left uses a lot. Do you want a live son or a dead daughter? I mean, they use that as if there's only this binary choice. You either have to embrace this transgender ideology or you're going to lose your child. There are other ways. There are other ways to deal with gender dysphoria. Now, I had spoken, former Governor Asa Hutchinson of Arkansas. We worked with him, and he did something he did the same thing. At the very end, he vetoed the legislation. governor of my home state of Louisiana, of course, a Democrat. He vetoed it. He was overridden. So was the governor of Arkansas. House Bill 68 passed overwhelmingly in both chambers there in the state of Ohio. What will it take to override the governor's veto?
Well, I think we're on our way there, Tony, just to be honest with you. I know immediately, and I've tried to be diplomatic, but the reality of it is we have to do this. And immediately my colleagues, before he was done with his speech, they were texting me, time to override, time to override. They were ready to drive down that same day to override the governor if they could. Every statewide elected official, except the one Democrat that we have, Sherrod Brown, has all said, we want to override this. We support the legislature, override this veto, override it now, override it as soon as you can. Even the presidential candidates have jumped in on this. President Trump, Governor Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy, they've all called on us to override this. The other three have not spoken up yet. They really need to. Anyone that wants to be president needs to stand, tell us where they stand on this issue. Our Senator J.D. Vance is on our side. He even has legislation on the national level that just needs to be taken up so that we can also protect kids in California and some of those crazy places. So we have the momentum with us on this. I think we're going to get it done, and I think we're going to get it done soon.
So, Pastor Gary, we've got listeners and viewers in Ohio. What do they need to do?
They need to go to ohiohouse.gov, look up who their state representative is and who their senator is, email them, call them, be relentless until we get there. Not just one day, but every day. Call them, email them, let them know, call the speaker, let him know that you want to override this. He's on our teams at this point. He's supportive of this. Call, the Senate President's office. Let everyone know that you want this to be overridden and that you want it overridden now.
All right, we're going to put that word out. It's also, folks, it's at contact information at tonyperkins.com. Also, FRC's resources there so you can better discuss this issue. Pastor Gary, I just again want to thank you for your leadership there in Ohio, stepping forward as a pastor. And I know you get a lot of criticism just for being a pastor, stepping into that arena, but we need more of that. And this is an example that I've told others why pastors need to be in elected offices at the state level, local level, is because when you stand on truth, you're not intimidated by those who come against you because you know what truth is and you're willing to stand for it. So I want to say thank you.
You're welcome, and God bless you. And I thank you for the inspiration that you have been to me throughout my entire ministry. I appreciate that.
All right, Pastor Gary, Happy New Year, and we're going to be working with you to see you succeed there in the state of Ohio.
God bless you. Thank you so much.
All right. State Representative Gary Click of Ohio's 88th District. Okay. All right, folks, here it is. You heard it, contact your senators and your senator and your state representative if you live in the state of Ohio. And we've made it really easy for you at tonyperkins.com under episode resources. We've got a link there where you can just click on it and it'll take you to your elected officials there so you can communicate with them. We also have resources there. This is really good for pastors. All right, if you need to understand this issue better, and you want to have conversations with your neighbors, family, friends, or your congregation, it's right there. A lot of information at tonyperkins.com. But to give us even more information on this, I'm going to invite in Dr. Jennifer Bowens, Director of the Center for Family Studies here at the Family Research Council. She has testified before several legislatures on the need for this legislation. And she has, prior to her work at the Family Research Council, she worked as a clinician and researcher addressing the effects of psychological trauma. As a researcher, she studied the effects of mass traumatic events like 9/11. Dr. Bowens, welcome back to Washington Watch. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too, Tony. It's good to be here.
Well, it's good to see you. Let me ask you this, your reaction to the governor's veto last week.
Yeah, I mean, I echo the same thing as Pastor Gary. It's really disappointing, especially when, you have so much scientific evidence that's come out at this stage in the debate. And it's all points towards that gender affirming care is not helpful. It does not prevent kids from committing suicide or attempting to suicide. In fact, we don't have one single study that we could point to that says, oh yeah, there's actually some evidence out here that shows gender affirming care prevents kids from suicide. I mean, actually, we have evidence showing the contrary, that the harms that are done physiologically and psychologically through gender affirming care. So this is very disappointing. As you know, we submitted testimony for this bill to support this bill as well. And so we know that the governor has a lot of material he could pull from lots of different groups.
I believe this was a statement he made last week, is that what you learn is everybody agrees there's a need to be there needs to be a process and a focus on mental health. Now, I would agree with that, but that's part of the problem, is that they're not allowing them to get the counseling and the mental health aspects of this addressed. They're just pushing them down this transgender assembly line.
Yeah, and one of the things that the governor's quoted in several different articles as saying is that, you know, he wants to go through a rulemaking process so that, you know, he can sort of address these pop-up clinics and, you know, get kids the right mental health care. Well, that's a gross misunderstanding of the state of the mental health care, because he's not understanding how institutionalized gender affirming care has become for every licensed practitioner, including many medical professionals. And so to just say, get more counseling is sending them exactly down the same path as these pop-up clinics. It's a rush job, whether it's a pop-up clinic like Planned Parenthood, or if you're going through some kind of counselor. We're, you know, coming from the field, we've all been trained to support gender affirming care. So that's not the answer. A bill like the SAFE Act is.
So you're an expert in trauma and its effects on people. Many detransitioners now speak of the trauma of the entire process and the lies told to them. Just in the few seconds we have left, speak to that.
Yeah. Well, when you have a whole system telling you to disconnect from who God has made you to be and disconnect from your biological innate identity, that is traumatic. And we don't even know the full ramifications of this. It is yet to be studied, but there is definitely a trauma when you're supporting a type of a body dissociation that's certainly psychological and spiritual as well.
We're only creating a bigger problem by
Absolutely
allowing this to continue going forward. Dr. Jennifer Bowens, always great to see you. Thanks so much for taking time to join us today.
Happy New Year, Tony.
Thank you. All right, folks, for those living in Ohio, you've got your homework. Contact your state representative and your senator and encourage them to support the override of the governor's veto of House Bill 68, the SAFE Act. All right, that's all we have time for today. Thanks so much for joining us, and until next time, let me leave you once again with the encouraging words of the Apostle Paul, which you can find in Ephesians 6, where he says, when you've done everything you can do, when you've prayed, when you've prepared, and when you've taken your stand, by all means, keep standing.
Washington Watch with Tony Perkins is brought to you by Family Research Council and is entirely listener-supported. Portions of the show discussing candidates are brought to you by Family Research Council Action. For more information on anything you've heard today, or to find out how you can partner with us in our ongoing efforts to promote faith, family, and freedom, visit TonyPerkins.com. Also, to leave a comment about Washington Watch, call our watch line at 1-866-372-7234. That's 1-866-372-7234.